The prison was silent on the night before his execution. Guards whispered about the man in the orange jumpsuit, a man with nothing left but regrets. When asked his final wish, he didn't ask for a meal, a cigarette, or forgiveness. He asked for just one thing: to see his dog one last time. The request stunned everyone. Some mocked it, others felt pity, but no one expected what would happen next. When the dog was finally brought into that cold prison hall, the reunion shook even the hardest of hearts. But then something unbelievable happened, something that changed everything. Moments later, the truth behind the crime began to unravel, buried for years. What happened next shocked everyone. This was no ordinary last wish, it was a story that changed everything. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Every footstep of the guards outside his cell reminded him that time was running out. He was not afraid of death. He was afraid of dying with that wish unspoken. And when the question finally came, "What is your last request?" his answer would shock them all. The warden entered the cell block with a clipboard in hand, his footsteps heavy, his expression unreadable. 2 guards trailed behind him, their eyes cold, rehearsed in detachment. Everyone knew what the visit meant. Time was closing in, and procedure demanded the same ritual for every man facing his end. The prisoner sat upright on his cot, back straight, though his hands trembled slightly. He knew what they were about to ask, the question every condemned man was given before the end. The warden's voice was flat, businesslike. "It's time. What will be your last request?" The air in the cell thickened. Most men asked for food, comfort meals that reminded them of life outside. Steak, fried chicken, apple pie. Others asked for small indulgences, cigarettes, books, one final drink. But the man in orange did not hesitate. His voice was low, almost breaking, but clear enough to echo off the walls. "I want to see my dog." For the first time in years, the guards' masks slipped. One raised an eyebrow, the other smirked as though it were a joke. Even the warden paused, pen hovering over the clipboard. "Your dog?" he repeated, uncertain if he'd heard correctly. The prisoner nodded, his eyes shining with something raw and vulnerable. "Yes, before I die, I want to see him." Just once, silence filled the space. The request was so unexpected, so human, it unsettled the room. One of the guards scoffed. "You're about to face the needle, and you're worried about a mutt?" The prisoner's jaw tightened, but his voice held steady. "He's not a mutt. He's family. The only family I ever had that never turned its back on me." The warden scribbled something onto his clipboard but said nothing further. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen hardened men break, but rarely did they see them strip down to such bare honesty. There was no defiance in his tone, no plea for life, only love as simple and pure as it came. When the warden left, the prisoner sank back onto his cot, heart pounding. The risk of denial weighed heavy, but hope flickered for the first time in years. His final wish wasn't for food, comfort, or even forgiveness. It was for a reunion, one last chance to look into the eyes that had never judged him. And though the request stunned everyone, it would set in motion events that none of them could have predicted. Long before steel bars and orange uniforms defined his world, there had been wide-open fields and the echo of paws racing across the dirt. He had been younger then, rough around the edges but not yet broken by life. And beside him, always beside him, was Rex, a German shepherd pup with ears too big for his head and eyes that gleamed with devotion. He hadn't planned on keeping a dog. One stormy night he found Rex shivering near a dumpster. No collar, no owner in sight. Something about those pleading eyes reached inside him. Against all logic, he scooped the pup into his jacket and carried him home. Just for tonight, he told himself. But one night turned into forever. Rex became his shadow. Every morning the dog would bound to the door, tail wagging furiously, eager for their runs through empty lots and cracked sidewalks. Every evening Rex would curl at his feet, a living reminder that in a world full of betrayal, loyalty still existed. The man wasn't perfect. His life choices were messy, sometimes reckless. But no matter how late he stumbled home, Rex was always there, ears perking, tongue lolling, eyes shining with unconditional love. No judgment, no questions, just pure faith. He trained Rex with patience he hadn't realized he possessed. The dog learned commands quickly, responding not only to words but to tone, to feeling. It was as though Rex could sense his moods, grounding him when anger boiled, comforting him when loneliness crept in. More than a pet, Rex became his anchor, a reason to keep moving forward when the world felt heavy. But then came the arrest, the flashing lights, the handcuffs, the cell. That night haunted him more than any trial or sentence. He remembered Rex's frantic barking as officers pulled him away, the dog lunging against the leash a neighbor tried to hold. His last glimpse of freedom wasn't the open sky, but Rex straining, fighting, desperate to follow him. Years passed, and though bars separated them, the bond never faded. Every memory of Rex remained sharp, alive in his heart. He imagined the dog waiting by a door that would never open, ears twitching at every sound, hoping for the footsteps that never came. The thought cut deeper than the sentence itself. In prison, men survived by hardening their hearts. But when he thought of Rex, his defenses crumbled. That dog had been his family, his only constant in a world that changed too fast. And as the end drew closer, the prisoner's greatest regret wasn't the mistakes that led him here. It was leaving Rex behind, without a goodbye. Now, with his final days dwindling, he wanted just one thing: to see the dog who had never stopped being his reason to live. The request spread through the prison like wildfire. By nightfall, every guard knew. The condemned man's last wish wasn't for steak or cigarettes, but to see his dog. The halls buzzed with quiet whispers, some mocking, others uncertain. For men accustomed to hardened criminals, the request seemed almost human. In the warden's office, the debate grew heated. Around the table sat senior officers, their faces grim under the fluorescent lights. "This is ridiculous," one guard snapped. "He's days away from execution. What difference does it make if he wants a dog?" Another leaned back, arms crossed. "That's exactly the point. He's not asking for much. Maybe we grant him this, show a shred of mercy." The first scoffed. Mercy? He didn't show mercy to his victims. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of that truth settling. The man's crimes couldn't be ignored. But then the chaplain, usually quiet during these meetings, spoke softly. "A last request isn't about the crime. It's about the soul. If his heart clings to this dog, perhaps there's a reason. Perhaps it's the last good thing in him." The warden rubbed his temples, torn. Regulations gave flexibility. Final wishes were granted if reasonable. Food, books, even visits from family had precedent. But a dog? Bringing an animal inside a maximum security prison was a logistical nightmare. What if the dog reacted violently? What if the reunion turned chaotic? Yet the image lingered. A man on death row, not begging for his life, but for a moment of love. Even the toughest guards couldn't shake it. One officer muttered, "I've seen men ask for cigars, for alcohol, even for strange meals. But this, I don't know. It feels different." The warden finally stood, his decision heavy on his shoulders. "We'll consider it. But if it happens, it must be controlled, safe, and supervised. No risks." As the meeting adjourned, some guards shook their heads in disbelief. Others stared at the floor in quiet thought. Deep down, they all knew this request wasn't about policy. It was about humanity. And granting it, they sensed, might lead to something none of them were prepared for. For 2 days, the prison buzzed with uncertainty. The request hung in the air like a question no one wanted to answer. Guards whispered in hallways. The chaplain prayed quietly in the chapel, and even the prisoners speculated about whether the dog would come. Finally, the warden called another meeting. The room was tense, filled with senior staff and legal advisors. His voice was firm, but beneath it was something almost reluctant. "We've reviewed the request. It doesn't violate protocol. And though unusual, it is possible." A ripple of surprise moved through the room. One guard immediately objected. "This is a waste of resources. Bringing a dog into this facility? What kind of message does that send?" Another spoke up, softer but resolute. "It sends a message of humanity. The man's about to die. If his final wish is to see his dog, what harm can it do? What if this is his way of leaving peacefully?" The chaplain nodded. "Sometimes a last act of mercy means more than the punishment itself." The warden's eyes swept the room. He saw resistance, but also quiet agreement. After a long pause, he said, "Very well. We'll grant it. The reunion will take place under strict supervision. The dog will be inspected, cleared, and only allowed in a controlled space." Silence followed, heavy with the weight of the decision. Some guards shook their heads, others looked away. But deep inside, all of them felt a flicker of something they couldn't quite name. Curiosity, maybe even dread. News traveled fast. When the prisoner was told, his reaction stunned everyone. The man who had carried himself with hardened silence, who rarely spoke except in short, clipped sentences, broke down completely. His shoulders shook, his face buried in his hands. And for the first time in years, tears ran freely. He whispered only 2 words. "Thank you." The guards who witnessed it walked away quietly, unsettled. They had seen men beg for life, cry for freedom, curse their fate, but never had they seen such raw gratitude for something so simple. The reunion was set, and though it was just a dog, everyone sensed the moment would be anything but ordinary. The morning of the reunion dawned heavy and gray, as though the sky itself sensed the weight of what was to come. Inside the prison, the usual rhythm of clangs and footsteps carried an undercurrent of unease. Guards whispered in passing, their eyes betraying curiosity. This was no ordinary day. The warden arrived earlier than usual, his expression unreadable. He gave instructions with clipped precision. The meeting would be tightly controlled, no unnecessary risks, and only select personnel present. The atmosphere was almost ceremonial, as though they were preparing not for an inmate's final hours but for something sacred. Meanwhile, the prisoner sat on the edge of his cot, restless. He hadn't slept. All night his mind replayed memories of Rex, the sound of paws skidding across wooden floors, the way the dog's ears perked up at his voice, the warmth of his head resting on his knee. He whispered to the empty cell, "He'll remember me. He has to." Across town, preparations were also underway. The dog, older now, had been living with a caretaker since the man's imprisonment. Age had sprinkled gray around his muzzle, but his eyes still burned with the same loyalty. When handlers brought out the leash that morning, Rex's ears shot up. He barked once, sharp and eager, tail thumping with a force that shook dust from the walls. Somehow instinct told him this day was different. The van ride to the prison was tense. The handler stroked Rex's fur, whispering reassurance, but the dog remained alert, his gaze fixed forward as though he knew where he was headed. Back at the prison, the designated room was prepared. A bare hall, cleared of furniture except for a single chair and a barrier of guards standing watch. The air smelled of disinfectant and iron. Every precaution was taken. But beneath the strict order was something no one could admit aloud: anticipation. When the prisoner was finally led from his cell, chains rattling softly, his face betrayed a vulnerability none of the guards had seen before. His usual stoicism was gone, replaced by trembling hands and a flicker of hope in his eyes. He walked slower than usual, not from reluctance, but from fear. Fear that his dog might not remember him after all these years. As he reached the hall, he caught the faint sound of paws scuffing against concrete, the jingle of a leash. His breath hitched, chest tightening. The guards exchanged glances, some pretending indifference, others unable to hide their unease. Everything was ready. The prisoner stood waiting. The dog was only steps away, and in the silence before they met, it felt as though the entire world was holding its breath. The steel door at the far end of the hall groaned open, and every head turned. A guard stepped through first, holding a leash. Behind him, Rex appeared. His paws clicked against the floor, ears pricked, tail wagging in uncertain arcs. For a moment, the dog froze, sniffing the sterile air, his eyes scanning the room. The prisoner's breath caught in his throat. His hands, shackled at the wrists, trembled as he leaned forward. Years of waiting collapsed into this single instant. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Rex." The dog's ears shot up. His body stiffened, and then with a low whine that echoed through the hall, recognition dawned. His tail wagged furiously, so hard his whole body shook. Rex lunged against the leash, barking with a desperation that silenced even the guards. The handler struggled, caught off guard by the sudden force.
"Easy, boy, easy!"
But Rex was unstoppable. Years of separation melted away in the sound of his cries. His eyes locked onto the prisoner with a mixture of joy and longing no one in that room could mistake. The prisoner fell to his knees, chains clattering loudly. Tears blurred his vision as he stretched out his hands.
"That's my boy."
"That's my Rex." His voice, roughened by years of silence, rang with a rawness that pierced the hardest hearts. The warden hesitated, then gave a silent nod. The leash was released. Rex bolted forward, nails scraping the floor as he crossed the room in seconds. He slammed into the prisoner's chest, nearly knocking him backward. The man wrapped his arms around the dog's neck, burying his face in the familiar fur. Sobs racked his body, unguarded, unashamed. Rex licked his face frantically, whining, pawing, as though trying to erase the years apart. The prisoner whispered through tears, "You remember me. You didn't forget." Around the room, guards stood frozen. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others blinked rapidly, pretending not to wipe at their eyes. They had expected a moment, but not this flood of love, not this raw collision of loyalty and grief. The chaplain, standing quietly in the corner, murmured, "Even here, love endures." The man clung to Rex as though the world outside no longer existed. The dog pressed closer, nuzzling his chest, refusing to let go. It wasn't just a reunion, it was proof. Proof that even in the darkest places, bonds of loyalty could survive unbroken. For the first time in years, the prisoner felt human again. Not an inmate, not a number, but a man loved beyond condition. And as Rex's tail thumped wildly against the concrete, no one in that hall doubted. This was more than a wish fulfilled. It was destiny reclaiming what time had tried to steal. For a long time, the prisoner did not speak. He simply held Rex, face buried in the familiar scent of his fur, as if inhaling years of memories in one desperate breath. The dog pressed so close it seemed as though he was trying to merge into the man, to make up for every lost second. The sound of his frantic whines echoed through the sterile hall, raw and filled with love. The guards shifted, uneasy, but none dared interrupt. Something about the scene felt sacred, untouchable. Even the warden, usually stoic, lowered his gaze, unwilling to break the spell. At last, the prisoner lifted his head. Tears streamed down his face, his eyes red but alight with something the guards had never seen in him before. "Peace." "I thought you'd forgotten me," he whispered, stroking Rex's ears. "I thought maybe time had taken me out of your heart." Rex answered with another sharp bark, tail wagging furiously. He pawed at the man's chest, whining as if scolding him for ever doubting their bond. The prisoner laughed through his tears, a sound rusty and broken but genuine. His mind flooded with memories, Rex as a clumsy pup chasing after shoelaces, tumbling over his own paws. Long walks at dusk where the dog would pull ahead, then turn to check if his master was still there. Nights when the world felt cruel, and Rex would rest his head on his lap, silent but comforting. Those moments were more than memories now. They were proof that loyalty could outlive years, chains, and walls. The chaplain stepped forward cautiously, voice low. "They say a dog never forgets his master. Seems they were right." The prisoner nodded faintly, unable to look away from Rex. "He never left me. Even when I was in here, even when the nights were so dark I thought I'd lose my mind, I had him in my heart. He kept me alive." The dog pressed his muzzle into the man's palm, closing his eyes. For a moment, everything else vanished. No prison, no execution date, no regrets. Just a man and his dog, bound together by a love purer than anything the world could tarnish. But as the reunion stretched on, Rex began to behave differently. His tail slowed, his body stiffened ever so slightly. He sniffed the air, ears twitching, gaze shifting toward the guards. A low growl rumbled deep in his throat, soft but unmistakable. The prisoner noticed immediately. He stroked Rex's back, trying to soothe him. "Easy, boy. It's okay." Yet the dog's eyes stayed locked on one corner of the room, sharp and unblinking. The guards tensed, exchanging wary glances. "Control him," one muttered. But the prisoner's protective instincts flared. He pulled Rex closer, shielding him as though the world itself were a threat. His voice shook as he whispered, "What is it, Rex? What do you see?" The reunion had begun as a moment of healing, a final gift of love before death. But in the stillness of that hall, it was becoming something else entirely. Rex had remembered his master. Now it seemed he remembered something more, something hidden, something dangerous. And that truth was about to change everything. At first, no one wanted to acknowledge the change. The prisoner still clung to Rex, whispering to him, stroking his fur, but the dog's body was tense now, his ears sharp and alert. The joyful reunion had shifted into something far more unsettling. A low growl vibrated from Rex's chest, steady and warning. His gaze fixed on the far side of the room where two guards stood near the door. The men exchanged uncomfortable glances, one shifting his weight, the other tightening his grip on his baton. "Control your dog," one of them barked, his voice rough with unease. The prisoner pulled Rex closer, shaking his head. "He's not dangerous. He's just..." sensing something. His words sounded calm, but inside his chest panic grew. He had never seen Rex like this, never seen joy twist so quickly into suspicion. The chaplain, standing quietly nearby, frowned. "Animals don't growl for no reason," he murmured. The warden stepped forward, tone clipped. "Enough, the dog is here under our mercy. If it becomes a threat, it leaves immediately." But Rex didn't back down. His eyes, sharp and focused, never left one of the guards. Each time the man shifted, Rex's growl deepened. His body coiled like a spring, tail stiff, claws scraping the concrete floor. The prisoner's heart pounded. He stroked Rex's neck, whispering desperately, "What is it, boy? What are you telling me?" The dog's loyalty had never failed him before. If he was growling now, it wasn't random. It meant something. The guard under Rex's glare tried to force a smirk, but sweat dotted his forehead. "It's a mangy mutt," he snapped, louder than necessary. That's all. But the others noticed. The dog wasn't growling at the room. He was growling at him. Silence spread through the hall, thick and tense. Every eye shifted between the dog, the prisoner, and the guard, whose face was suddenly pale. The prisoner held Rex tightly, his voice trembling as he spoke, not to the guards, but to himself. "You've never been wrong before." "Have you, boy?" And in that instant, a chill swept through everyone present. The reunion that had begun as a final act of mercy was unraveling into something no one had expected, a revelation waiting to break free. The room seemed to shrink under the weight of Rex's growl. Every rumble from his chest echoed off the concrete walls, louder than the guards' boots, louder than the chains clinking against the prisoner's wrists. The dog wasn't confused. He was certain. His eyes locked on the guard by the door with unwavering focus. The prisoner, still kneeling on the floor, whispered urgently into Rex's ear. "What is it, boy? What are you trying to tell me?" He could feel the tremors running through the dog's body. This wasn't aggression, it was recognition. The targeted guard shifted uncomfortably. "Control him or I'll have him removed," he barked, though his voice cracked slightly. His hand hovered near his baton, but his eyes flicked nervously toward Rex as if trying to avoid direct contact. The warden stepped forward, his tone sharp. "Stand down. The dog's behavior will be documented, but no one makes a move without my command." His words carried authority, yet his gaze narrowed on the trembling guard. He noticed what everyone else was now beginning to see. Fear. Rex suddenly lunged a step forward, barking with ferocity. The sound reverberated through the chamber, so fierce it made the hairs on every man's neck rise. The handler struggled to pull him back, but Rex fought, his body straining, claws scraping deep marks into the floor. The prisoner's heart raced. He looked from his loyal dog to the pale-faced guard. "Why him?" he demanded, his voice trembling. "What did you do? Why does my dog know you?" The guard bristled, face flushing. "It's a dog. It doesn't know anything," he snapped. But his words came too fast, too defensive, and the room caught it. The chaplain, normally silent, spoke with quiet conviction. "Animals see what men hide." The silence that followed was thick, broken only by Rex's relentless barking. The prisoner's chest heaved as realization clawed at him. His final wish had been to see his dog one last time. But now, in this moment, it felt like destiny. Rex wasn't just here to say goodbye. He was here to reveal something. The prisoner's eyes burned with sudden intensity. "Rex doesn't lie. If he's warning me, there's a reason." The guard took a step back, sweat glistening on his brow. His hand trembled as he reached for the baton at his hip, but another officer blocked him, suspicion rising in the air like smoke. The warden's voice cut through the chaos, low but firm. "What is going on here?" No one answered. All eyes were on Rex, his body rigid, his growls deepening, his loyalty demanding the truth. And in that charged silence, it became clear. This reunion wasn't only about love. It was about revelation. The dog had remembered something everyone else had missed, and what came next could unravel everything they thought they knew about the prisoner's fate. The chamber felt frozen, every breath shallow, every sound drowned beneath Rex's snarling growl. The dog's focus didn't waver, his body locked on the guard near the door. To the others, it was just an animal's instinct. But to the prisoner, it was a truth clawing its way into the light. He rose slowly to his feet, chains rattling with each step. His eyes burned as he looked at the guard. "Rex knows you," he said, voice low but cutting. He remembers something I never saw. What did you do? The guard stiffened, trying to smirk, but the color had drained from his face. This is absurd. It's a dog. Nothing more. The warden's sharp eyes narrowed. He had seen countless criminals deny guilt with that same edge of desperation. Now he heard it in the guard's voice. Animals don't snarl at strangers without reason, the warden muttered. Rex barked again, louder, lunging forward. The handler fought to restrain him, but the dog refused to yield. His paws clawed the floor, his teeth bared, his entire body consumed by the need to expose what only he could sense. The chaplain stepped closer, speaking softly but firmly. Perhaps this is divine providence. Perhaps the truth refuses to stay buried. The prisoner's chest heaved, rage and hope colliding inside him. You set me up, didn't you? His voice cracked with fury. All these years I thought I was guilty, thought I deserved this. But Rex is showing me the truth. The accused guard's composure shattered. His eyes darted wildly around the room, sweat dripping down his temples. This is madness, he shouted. You'll believe a dog over me? The silence that followed was deafening. Every guard, every official, every witness in the chamber could feel it. The weight of something breaking open. Rex let out a guttural snarl, then suddenly shifted. He darted forward with such force that the handler lost his grip. The German shepherd lunged, stopping inches away from the trembling guard, teeth bared but not biting. He simply stood there, eyes locked, growl reverberating like a verdict. The prisoner's own breath caught. He whispered almost to himself, he was there. The night it happened. You were there. The warden's face hardened. Explain yourself, officer, he demanded. But the guard's words stumbled, collapsing into fragments. I wasn't supposed to. He stopped, realizing too late the trap his tongue had sprung. Gasps rippled through the room. Another officer stepped forward, grabbing the man's arm. What weren't you supposed to do? The truth spilled like poison breaking from a cracked bottle. The guard's voice rose, frantic. He wasn't meant to take the fall. I only wanted. He stopped again, but the damage was done. The room exploded in whispers, shock and fury blending with the sharp clang of boots as other guards restrained him. The prisoner staggered back, stunned. For years he had carried the crushing weight of guilt, believing his fate sealed by his own hands. Now his dog, his loyal Rex, had torn through the silence, exposing a betrayal hidden in plain sight. The chaplain's voice trembled as he whispered. The truth was chained, but love set it free. The warden, face grim, ordered, "Get him out of my sight," and reopen the case immediately. For the first time in years, hope surged in the prisoner's chest. He sank to his knees, clutching Rex, tears streaming. You saved me, he whispered. Even here, you saved me. Chaos erupted the moment the guilty guard was dragged away. The chamber buzzed with shouts, radios crackling, boots pounding against the concrete. What had begun as a quiet, controlled reunion between a man and his dog had transformed into a storm threatening to unravel the prison itself. The warden barked orders, his voice slicing through the noise. Reopen the file. Get legal on the line, now. Papers shuffled, phones rang, and within minutes, word spread beyond the prison walls. Lawyers were woken in the dead of night. Clerks scrambled to dig through dusty files. The clock was ticking and everyone knew what was at stake. The prisoner sat frozen, clutching Rex tightly. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths as the weight of years crashed down on him. He had come to accept death. He had even welcomed it as punishment for sins he thought he had committed. But now hope surged like fire in his veins. Could this really change everything? Rex pressed against him, steady and unshakable. The dog's presence was an anchor amidst the chaos, as if reminding him that loyalty could reveal truths even courts could not. In the warden's office, tension grew unbearable. A defense attorney slammed a folder onto the table. If what that guard confessed is true, the conviction is compromised. We need to halt the execution immediately. But he's scheduled for tomorrow morning, another officer argued, voice sharp with panic. There's no time to go through appeals. The lawyer's eyes narrowed. Then we make time. If we don't, this prison could be responsible for executing an innocent man. Every second became a battle. Calls to judges, emergency hearings, last-minute filings, all while the prisoner remained in his cell, clutching Rex as if the outcome of the world depended on that grip. He whispered into the dog's ear, voice trembling. You knew. You've always known, haven't you? You're the reason I'm still breathing. The chaplain visited briefly, kneeling by the bars, His voice was steady, but his hands shook. Miracles don't always arrive with trumpets. Sometimes they come with pause. As the night dragged into dawn, the legal fight intensified. A federal judge finally agreed to hear the emergency motion. Guards escorted the prisoner, still chained, into a van waiting to transfer him to the courthouse. Rex followed close behind, his leash held tight but his stride firm, eyes sharp with determination. For the first time, the prisoner wasn't walking toward death. He was walking toward a chance, fragile, uncertain, but alive. And at the heart of it all was the dog who had never stopped believing in him. The courthouse buzzed with urgency, a place usually bound by routine, now thrumming with tension. Reporters gathered on the steps, their cameras flashing as the prison van pulled up. The prisoner stepped out, shackled but standing taller than he had in years, Rex at his side. For once, the eyes fixed on him weren't filled with scorn, they were filled with questions. Inside, the emergency hearing began. Judges, lawyers, and witnesses filled the chamber, their voices rising and falling in a storm of argument. At the center sat the prisoner, silent, his hand resting on Rex's back for strength. Every time fear threatened to swallow him, the steady rhythm of the dog's breathing pulled him back. The prosecution resisted fiercely. This confession is circumstantial. The guard was under duress. We can't undo years of evidence because of a dog's behavior. But the defense struck back harder. They presented recordings of the guard's slip, past reports of misconduct and inconsistencies in the original case files. Piece by piece, the truth unraveled. What once had seemed like airtight proof now looked like a puzzle deliberately twisted. As testimony unfolded, Rex sat alert, eyes fixed on the room, occasionally glancing toward his master. At one point, the accused guard was dragged into the chamber, forced to testify. His face was pale, sweat dripping down his temple as he stammered through questions. Rex's growl rumbled instantly, deep and undeniable. The sound silenced the entire courtroom. The judge leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "Mr. Dalton," he said to the guard, voice cold. "Why would a dog react this way unless he knows you? Answer carefully." The guard broke. His shoulders slumped, his words spilling out like water breaking through a dam. He admitted to tampering with evidence, planting items that would link the prisoner to the crime. He had motives: greed, resentment, personal gain. The real culprit had slipped through the cracks, and the prisoner had been left to carry the blame. Gasps filled the courtroom. Some cursed under their breath. Others shook their heads in disbelief. The prisoner's eyes filled with tears, his chest heaving as decades of anger and shame began to crack apart. He turned to Rex, whispering hoarsely, "You knew. You never stopped fighting for me." The judge struck the gavel, voice booming. Given the confession and the new evidence brought forth, the court has no choice but to vacate the conviction. Effective immediately, the prisoner is to be released. The words hung in the air, almost too heavy to believe. Released. A man who had walked into the courthouse expecting death now walked out with freedom. The shackles were removed, clattering to the floor with finality. The prisoner fell to his knees, clutching Rex, sobs tearing from his chest. Around them, the courtroom dissolved into chaos. Reporters shouting, lawyers arguing, but in that small circle of man and dog, none of it mattered. The chaplain wiped his eyes in the back row, whispering loyalty stronger than chains, love sharper than lies. As the prisoner rose, Rex at his side, the weight of the world shifted. The dog had not only saved his life, but had unearthed a truth hidden beneath years of silence. And though freedom felt surreal, one thing was certain: what happened here would be remembered forever. Not as the story of a condemned man, but as the story of a dog who changed everything. The air outside the courthouse felt different, lighter, sharper, alive. For the first time in years, the prisoner, now a free man, stood without chains on his wrists. The sky stretched endlessly above him, a sight he hadn't truly seen since before the bars closed around his life. Beside him, Rex trotted proudly, tail swishing as though he too understood the weight of the moment. Reporters swarmed, microphones shoved forward, cameras flashing, voices overlapping. "How does it feel to be free? What do you plan to do now? What do you say to those who doubted you?" The man said nothing. Words felt too small for what churned inside his chest. Instead, he knelt down, burying his hands into Rex's fur, whispering only for his dog to hear. "We did it, boy. You saved me." The crowd hushed, sensing the intimacy of the moment. For a brief, miraculous pause, all that existed was a man and his dog, reunited against every odd. Later, when the chaos settled, he sat on the steps. Rex pressed close to his side. He looked at the city bustling around him, a world that had moved on without him. The weight of lost years pressed down, yet the warmth of Rex leaning into him reminded him that not all had been lost. "Funny," he murmured, voice quiet but steady. "I thought my life was over. I thought I deserved what was coming, but you never let me believe the lie." Rex rested his head on his master's knee, eyes soft as though agreeing. The chaplain approached, standing a respectful distance away. "It seems," he said gently, "that loyalty has a way of rewriting destiny." The man nodded, his gaze fixed on Rex. "People gave up on me, but he never did. Maybe that's what saved me. Not just tonight, but all these years. I survived because I carried him here." He tapped his chest right over his heart. Night fell and the courthouse lights flickered on, but neither man nor dog moved for a long time. They sat together, breathing in freedom, the past unraveling behind them like a fading shadow. At last, he rose to his feet. "Come on, Rex," he said softly. "We've got a new life to build." Rex barked once, sharp and full of life, as if to say he was ready. The two walked away into the night, not as prisoner and pet, but as family bound by something unbreakable. The story spread quickly. Headlines splashed across newspapers, reporters repeating it on every channel. Dog saves man from execution. Some called it a miracle, others called it fate. But for the man at the center of it all, it was something far simpler. It was loyalty. Days after his release, he found himself walking down a quiet country road with Rex by his side. No flashing lights, no bars clanging shut, no guards barking orders, just open sky and the steady rhythm of paws keeping pace with him. Each step felt like a rebirth. He was no longer the condemned man. He was simply a man with his dog. He thought about the years he had lost, years locked away, burdened by guilt for crimes he hadn't committed. Yet as painful as those memories were, they faded each time Rex nudged his hand with a cold nose or wagged his tail with unshakable joy. The dog wasn't dwelling on the past. He was here now, living each moment fully, reminding his master to do the same. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the man sat on a worn wooden bench, Rex lying at his feet. He gazed at the fiery sky and whispered, "You gave me back my life. I thought I had nothing left, no reason to fight. But you proved me wrong. You showed me that love doesn't give up, even when the world does." Rex looked up, ears perked, and let out a single bark, as if answering. The man chuckled softly, brushing his hand over the dog's fur. "You're my angel, Rex, always were. Always will be." The world would remember the case, the courtroom, the shocking confession, but what mattered most wasn't written in legal documents or broadcast on television. It lived in the quiet bond between man and dog, a bond that had endured time, distance, and the shadow of death itself. The chaplain, when interviewed, had put it best. "Sometimes," he had said, "the purest form of truth doesn't come from man's voice, but from a creature's heart." That dog didn't just save his master's life, he reminded us all what loyalty means. As the stars began to appear, the man rose, Rex trotting eagerly beside him. Together, they walked forward into the unknown, carrying nothing but love, trust, and the certainty that no matter what came next, they would face it side by side. And so, the story closed not with an ending, but with a beginning, a second chance born from devotion. Because in the end, it wasn't the law or the court that set him free. It was a dog's unwavering love,